Roxane Gay is a raw, unflinching memoir that interrogates the intimate, often brutal relationship between trauma and the body. Gay writes with a voice that is at once candid, intellectual, and deeply vulnerable, inviting readers into the lived reality of a body that has been both refuge and prison. The book opens with a pivotal, devastating event from Gay's childhood, an act of sexual violence that she describes with restrained clarity, and then traces how that trauma shaped her relationship to food, safety, intimacy, and selfhood. Rather than offering tidy explanations, Gay maps the messy, non-linear ways trauma rewrites appetite and protection. Food becomes a buffer against the world, a way to make the body less desirable and therefore, in her calculus, safer. This is not a memoir about dieting or weight loss. It is an inquiry into how a person learns to inhabit a body that has been weaponized by others and then turned into a shield by the self. A central theme is protection and control. Gay shows how the body can be both a site of violation and a strategy for survival. She describes the paradox of using size as armor, how gaining weight felt like a rational, if painful, response to a world that had failed to protect her. At the same time, she interrogates the cost of that protection, the social invisibility, the medical neglect, the daily humiliations and microaggressions that come with living in a fat body. Gay refuses to sentimentalize or simplify these trade-offs. She names the anger, the grief, and the complicated gratitude that coexist in her choices. Closely tied to protection is the theme of shame and public scrutiny. Gay writes about how society polices bodies, especially Black women's bodies, through a mixture of moralizing, medicalizing, and aesthetic judgment. She recounts humiliating medical encounters where doctors dismiss or blame her, and she analyzes how cultural narratives about willpower and worthiness shape the way fat people are treated. Gay's critique is intersectional. She situates fatphobia within broader systems of racism, sexism, and class bias, showing how these forces compound to limit access to care, dignity, and safety. Her reflections are both personal testimony and cultural analysis, moving seamlessly between anecdote and critique. Another major strand is intimacy and desire. Gay writes with brutal honesty about sex, consent, and the longing for connection. She explores how trauma complicates desire, how it can both blunt and intensify longing, and how the body that once protected her can become an obstacle to intimacy. Gay resists easy narratives of redemption. She does not present a single path to healing, but instead describes a series of experiments in vulnerability, from casual encounters to attempts at committed relationships. Throughout, she insists on the right to pleasure and the right to be seen as a sexual being, even when the world insists otherwise. Her accounts of desire are neither titillating nor clinical. They are humane, often painful, and always searching for dignity. Language and identity are also central. Gay is a writer who thinks about writing. She reflects on the act of telling this story and the risks of exposure. She interrogates the ways memoir can be consumed, how readers may seek spectacle or moral lessons, and she resists being reduced to a single narrative. Her prose moves between lyrical passages and sharp analytical sentences, creating a rhythm that mirrors the book's emotional complexity. She also examines how identity categories, race, gender, sexuality, and body size intersect in her life, shaping how she is perceived and how she perceives herself. Gay's voice is both intimate and public. She writes as a woman who has been scrutinized and as an intellectual who refuses to let personal pain be privatized into cliché. A persistent concern is medical care and the healthcare system. Gay recounts experiences of being dismissed, misdiagnosed, or treated as a problem rather than a person. She critiques a medical culture that often reduces fat bodies to pathology and fails to address trauma as a root cause of health issues. Her critique extends beyond individual clinicians to structural problems, insurance, access, and the moralizing language of health culture. Gay's account is a call for more humane, trauma-informed care that recognizes the whole person rather than policing bodies according to narrow norms. Grief and anger run through the book as twin engines. Gay does not shy from anger, at perpetrators, at institutions, at a culture that equates worth with appearance, and she treats grief as an ongoing companion rather than a stage to be completed. She writes about mourning the life she might have had, the relationships that were altered by trauma, and the small daily losses that accumulate when a body is treated as a spectacle. Yet alongside grief and anger, there are moments of tenderness, friendships that hold, small acts of self-care that matter, and the slow, stubborn work of learning to live with a body that is both vulnerable and resilient.